The snow fell in heavy, unbroken sheets that morning, swallowing the streets of Manhattan in a cold, white silence. Rowan Mercer, a man whose name alone could move stock markets, stepped out of his sleek black sedan with the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing on his chest. For weeks he had barely slept, living between boardrooms and conference calls, trying to outrun the grief that had clung to him since the accident 6 months earlier. But nothing, not success, not money, not power, had filled the hollow place inside him. And then, as he crossed the sidewalk toward his building, he saw something that made him freeze. A tiny figure sat alone in a drift of snow, hunched over, trembling. When she lifted her head, Rowan's heart stuttered. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, her cheeks flushed red from the cold, her purple coat dusted in white, stared at him with eyes too brave for someone so small. It was the moment his world shifted, though he didn't know it yet. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Rowan hurried toward her, the sharp winter wind cutting at his face as he knelt beside the fragile child. His expensive coat fell around her like a shield, but she barely seemed aware of the cold. What struck him wasn't her shivering, or the way her mittens were soaked through, or even the way she hugged her knees to her chest. It was the emptiness in her expression, an emptiness he recognized all too well. He asked her name softly, carefully, afraid she might bolt if he moved too fast. The little girl didn't answer immediately. She looked up, searching his face as if trying to decide whether he was safe. And then, in a voice so small he almost didn't hear it, she whispered words that shattered him from the inside out. "Mister, do you know where my mommy went? She said she'd only be a minute. I've been waiting a long time." Rowan felt the ground tilt beneath him. He had lived through that kind of waiting. He knew the cruel ache of promises left hanging in the air. Memories of the night he lost his wife in the car crash struck him, raw and merciless. He stared at the girl, unable to speak for a moment, overwhelmed by a fierce, protective instinct he hadn't felt since before his life fell apart. He realized with a jolt that she was alone, truly desperately alone. The street was empty. The snow was thick. No adult searched for her. No one called her name. The city moved on without noticing her at all. Gathering himself, Rowan guided her gently to her feet and into the warmth of his car. She didn't fight him. She simply held onto the sleeve of his coat as if it were the only anchor she had left. As they drove, the girl stared out the window, her breath fogging the glass, her small hands balled tightly in her lap. Rowan asked again for her name, and this time she answered. "My name is Harper," she murmured, barely above a whisper. The name struck him, pure, delicate, like a whispered prayer. He asked where she last saw her mother, but Harper only shook her head, her eyes filling with tears she tried hard not to let fall. She kept saying her mother promised she would come back, but Rowan knew, in the heavy silence between her words, that something was terribly wrong. At the hospital emergency room he rushed her into, the staff immediately felt the urgency in the situation. Harper was treated for mild hypothermia, but physically she was going to be okay. Emotionally, she seemed suspended in a quiet fear, saying little, gripping the stuffed bear the nurse offered her. Rowan stood outside the examination room, his chest tight, torn between staying and walking away. He had never planned to let anyone back into the fragile pieces of his life again, but every time he tried to leave, he met Harper's eyes, those solemn, heartbreakingly hopeful eyes, and something inside him simply wouldn't allow it. Hours passed with no sign of a parent, no calls coming in, no frantic footsteps down the hallway. Harper had been abandoned, lost, or left behind. Rowan didn't know which, but all possibilities sickened him. He found himself pacing, dialing contacts he hadn't spoken to in years, pushing for answers, for help, for anything that would make sure she wouldn't have to suffer alone. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, he realized he wasn't doing this out of obligation. He cared, deeply, in a way that frightened him. When Harper was finally allowed to leave, the social worker gently explained that she would need a temporary caregiver until further investigation. Rowan didn't hesitate. He signed the forms before the woman even finished her sentence. Harper walked beside him, her fragile hand small in his, trusting him in that unspoken way children do when their hearts recognize safety. He took her to his penthouse, a place that had felt like a museum of memories since his wife passed. But now, as Harper wandered the living room, exhaling a soft, awed gasp at the view, something warm flickered inside him. For the first time in years, the place felt alive. Over the next days, Rowan watched her slowly unfold from fear into cautious joy. Harper laughed softly at the snow outside the window, sat on the kitchen counter as he cooked simple meals he hadn't made since his wife was alive, and curled up on the couch under a blanket to watch cartoons. She began drawing pictures, first of snow, then of houses, then of two figures holding hands. When Rowan asked about them, she simply said, "It feels less scary when someone is with me," and Rowan realized so did he. He found himself healing in her presence, remembering what it meant to care, to nurture, to feel hope again. Harper's trust wrapped around him gently, repairing things he thought were permanently broken. He cherished her laughter, protected her fears, and grew fiercely determined to keep her safe. And then, a week later, the call came. Her mother had been found. She had collapsed blocks away after suffering a medical emergency. She had survived, but had been unconscious all this time. Rowan brought Harper to the hospital again, his heart pounding with mixed relief and dread. Harper clung to him until they reached the door. When they entered, her mother, a frail woman with tired eyes, looked up and burst into tears at the sight of her daughter. Harper ran to her, and the reunion was pure, overwhelming emotion. Rowan stepped back, watching with a bittersweet ache. He knew this was right, but it still hurt. Before he could leave, Harper looked back at him with tears streaming down her face. She whispered, "You found me when no one else did. You saved me." Her mother echoed those words with trembling gratitude. Rowan swallowed hard, managing a nod. But when Harper ran back and wrapped her small arms around his waist, he broke silently inside. This child had returned color to his world, and now he had to let her go. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly means the world. Before you go, comment below. Kindness changes everything.